Hey guys, today we are going through the one more buffer operator called buffer toggle. So this is how it is different from the other is like here it's take the two arguments. One is opening, and another one is a closing selectors. So that's the reason we can choose like when I want to open the buffer and when I want to close the buffer as well. So my two with the two different arguments I can choose when to open and when to close. So it's something like opening the door. I put adding value into my buffer and I'm closing the door with some other output or other observable. So this is how it's work. Like opening is take the subscribable or promise, and the closing selector that's again a subscribable or promise, and that is what is written the operator function. So if I explain it like this is my source observable, so that's starting from value a b c up to z, and here like the opening interval or opening subscriber has emitted the value o first before the a. So here I'm opening up my observable buffer and then start observing that value a, sorry, storing the buffer value a and b, and then after b I'm just using the closing buffer. I'm emitting the value through the closing selector. So that's the reason it's close my buffer and emit that entire buffer. So it's contain the a and b, and that will be emitted to the my result observable. Similarly, then after C and D is not going to store anything in buffer because my previous buffer was already closed and there is no other value emitted by my opening subscribable. So it gonna be like C, D and E, three gonna be missed. When here again I'm opening up, I'm emitting the one more value, so that F is going to be stored into in my buffer, and immediately I'm just closing the value C again after some time. So before emitting the my Z, so it's gonna be only one value called F, and that is going to be stored in my buffer, and once it is closed it is going to emit and it will reset my buffer as well. Then after there is no any value from the opening subscribable, so the reason for that G is going to be skipped. So this is how it's working. So it's just monitored with the two different variables, opening and closing, and based on that is going to return my buffers. Okay, and now let's see in our code, and here you can see that same that import interval of observable I just use for creating a sequence of number, and the buffer toggle operator that we are gonna supposed to test and take just to restrict my numbers or output up to the 5 or 4, whatever the value I want to take it. So let's start with the first one. Forget about this one right now. I will explain while we are debugging this code. So let's say my source observable is starting from interval 100. So every 100 millisecond I'm emitting the new value, and that will be start from the 0, then 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. I'm opening up my opening observable is starting it is going to emit my value on every 600 seconds. So first value that gonna observe or start storing in a buffer, that will be a 5, because after 600 milliseconds it's gonna be emit that value. So from there it should be start storing into the buffer. And the closing selector, again, that's we again now need to check it out. We have to making sure that it should be a function. It should not be the directly subscribable or observable, but it is should be the function which returning a observable, right? So that's a closing selector because it's call every time whenever my opening value is emitted, same time is also calling this closing selector function. So that's we have to keep in mind. So here I'm just using that source.pipe. So that's my source. I'm piping that my operator, that's buffer toggle, and then I'm just using my 5, just I'm taking the 5 output out of it. So after 5 I will stop that my subscriptions, and then after result.subscribe value, then console, I'm gonna just console that value. So it should be returning a array of elements because we are using the buffer toggle. So let's see that how it's working on a browser. So just let me refresh it. Okay, so here you can see that is emitting almost like every time it's emitting 3 values, just because we have like a 200 millisecond of uh, my closing interval. So it will be something like this, like it start from the 0 because this is my source observable, so which consider like every 100 millisecond, right? So from 0 and 1, that is a gap between these two number will be the 100 millisecond. So I'm just using like a series of 9 up to 19 just for debugging purpose. Opening, that is my observable which emitting the value at every 600 milliseconds. So that you can see that the from here, this is here I'm gonna be emit my first, my opening will be emitting the first value, right? So that's from where it starts storing my values in buffer, from the source observable values into the buffer, right? So first value should be stored in a file. So you can see that in output, like is the first one is containing the file, and we are using the interval 200 milliseconds or 200 millisecond once that opening observable has been started, right? So that will wait go for up to 200 millisecond, and then after I'm emitting the new value from the closing. So here I'm closing my buffer. So it's till then it's gonna be have like a 5, 6 and 7, and that should be closed, then it should be closed. So my first of, and also at the same time it's gonna emit the value. So here you can see that my first buffer return, that is what 5, 6 and 7. Then again I'm using this after 600 milliseconds, so that should next should be like a 1200 millisecond, right? Because first was 600 and then 600 then. So it should be starting from here. So here you can see that the 8, 9 and 10, these three values already skipped. So 8, 9 and 10, that is already skipped in a browser. And then after it started over here, then again like it wait for the 200 milliseconds. So it's going to store 11, 12 and 13. So that's 11, 12 and 13. Then again 14, 15 and 16 going to skip, and 17, 18 and 19, that will be my third one, and so on. It will going to be 23, 24 and 25, and next one will be 29, 30 and 31. And since we are using take 5 only, so it's gonna be return me only 5 buffer. Then after it will going to be close it out. Okay, now let's check it out another code set. So I'm just commenting this one, and let me just hide this one, and let's start with this source region 2, and I'm just gonna be uncomment this part. Okay, so here you can see that source is interval is 100, opening is 100. So immediately that my first, it will start buffering my from right from the first value, right? And the closing selector is returning every 300 milliseconds. So I'm expecting like every buffer has 4 elements, and so on, right? So and then I'm using only take 4, so I'm just returning only, I will take the 4 output, and then after it will be just going to be close my result subscription. So result and subscribe, then value I'm going to use the console.value. Now let's see how it's behaving on. Here you go. So you can see that like a first one that started from the 1, 0, 1 and 2 and 3. So that's work fine, right? So like 0, 2, 3. Then after, here you can see that value 1, 2 and 3, this are getting repeated, right? So how, why it is repeating it? The reason was uh, because the my opening interval is emitting the value every 100 milliseconds. So after emitting the 0, when it emits the 1, it's emitting another value. But my previous buffer is still not yet closed, because my closing selector is almost as a 300 millisecond. So my first buffer is running, and it's also already started my second buffer, and then I'm using that, I'm storing the value in buffer. And as it how the toggle is behaving, sorry, not toggle but buffer operator is behaving, whatever the number of buffers are open, that my value is going to copy it on each and every buffer. So right now I have the 2 buffers open, so at that time it's going to copy my 0 and 1 on both the buffer. And a 200 millisecond, sorry 300 millisecond, there will be the value 2, and also going to open another buffer, so it will be 2, 2, 2. You can see that all that 3 buffer will be stored. Similarly my value third will be storing on a all 3 buffer. And after that my first buffer's closing selector has been called. So in that case, that value after emitting the value 3, it is going to be close my first buffer and emit immediately, and then destroy that one, and that will be continue on. Then after it will be my second buffer is going to close, then third buffer and fourth buffer and so on. So if you have like a overlapping between my opening and closing selector, then it's going to be duplicate my all that buffer values. The buffer may contain the duplicate value in that case, so that you have to keep in mind while you are working with the buffer. Okay, now let's check it out. My third one where I'm actually most confused and I'm still didn't get on the conclusion why it is happening. But just for but if you find any answer, just you can comment it on my YouTube video, and I will look into that one. So just let's check it out how it's working. Just so I have a similar code like a source is equal to 100, then opening I'm using emitting a value on every 300 millisecond, right? And the closing selector I'm using the function, so I'm also logging the value uh, because it's taking the one argument, so I'm also logging that value as well, and I'm just returning interval 0 multiplied by 100, sorry, I multiplied by 100. So value of I is always like a opening value. So what are the value emitted by the opening observable, that will be considered, that will become as argument of as I, right? So like first time I will get the value 0, then second time call I will get the value 1 and 2 and 3. So I'm just, what I'm doing over here, I'm just going to multiply by 100 simply. So every time my closing interval will keep increasing. So you can see the first time it will be emitting on the same time. So once the opening is comes emit the value at the same time, I'm emitting the closing value because I'm specifying the interval is 0. So it's going to be immediate one. Then on a second emitting value of opening, that I'm using the 1 multiplied by 100, so 100 millisecond. Then second time, so third time it will be 200 millisecond, then 300 millisecond, then 400 millisecond, and so on. So what I was expecting the value to be exported is something like first one should be containing only 2 because that's emitting immediately. Second time I will be expecting 5 and 6. Third time I will be expecting 8, 9 and 10. Then after I was, for third time I was expecting 11, 12, 13 and 14. And then after I was expecting the 14 to 18. So 14 may be repeating next time, or once after, because here I'm starting the overlapping between my closing and opening and closing interval, right? Okay, now let's check it out how it's behaving. So let me just show you like what's wrong over here. So here you can see that like, okay, the first one is working fine because it's emitting the only 0 0, so it should be emitting 1. Here it is emitting 5 and 6, so that's also good. 3 I was expecting, sorry, 2 I was, when opening was emitting 22, the third value, then I was expecting 8, 9 and 10, so that's perfect. For the 3 I was expecting 11, 12, 13 and 14, but here you can see that for 3 doesn't emit anything, which I don't know why, unless until I look into the code and then check it out. But here this is what where I'm confused over for this behavior. And then 4 I was expecting 14 to 18, but that come at the value when I'm emitting value 5. So I'm still confused why this is happening over here. But if anybody can find the answer, just put it in a comment to help me out, and I will be appreciate that one. So this is like how the toggle operator is working. Also, I want to make sure like what will happen if my closing selector emit the value before the opening selector, right? And how that can be happen. To just create it, what I'm going to do over here, I'm just putting here the queue scheduler. So the interval I'm specifying the queue scheduler, so it will be scheduled immediately instead of going into async. It will be try to schedule immediate basis, so that will go get the more priority. Similarly, I'm trying to give a scheduler over here, queue scheduler over here. So and here I'm keeping that opening interval as a normal one, as a default one, that will be the async one. So I'm just not writing that one, just I'm keeping like as a default one, so that will be the async. So async has normally the lowest priority compared to queue select schedulers and ASAP scheduler, right? So what I'm expecting over here is like maybe like a first time, because opening and closing, the closing selector may be emitting the value before the opening scheduler or opening observable emit the value, and in that case I shouldn't be getting any value in it in my buffer, and should be just immediately close that one, or maybe something else. So now let's check it out, how it's behaving. Ta-da. It's like all are empty. Not only that, but also I froze my entire browser. So it's something, some sort of is going to in a loop or something. I'm not sure like what's happening unless until we go and check it out in the code. But that is something weird happening when my closing selector emit the value before the opening observable. So that is what till now I observed. I just need to close this browser, and not even I'm not able to close that browser, but I just need to task and go to the schedule task and completely kill that browser. Then and then it's gonna be work. But that is what maybe you want to make sure, like closing selectors should not be emitting before my opening one. Otherwise, your browser or means your app gonna be crashed or it's going to be irresponsive. Hope you like these videos, and I'm gonna make you more videos related to other operators. So stay tuned on that one. Well, thank you.